says the United States will impose 25% tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports, including from Canada. He made the announcement on Air Force One.
We'll also be announcing steel tariffs on Monday.
On this tomorrow?
Monday, yeah, tomorrow.
What countries will those go on?
Everybody. Steel.
Including Canada and Mexico?
Yeah. Any steel coming into the United States is going to have a 25% tariff.
What about aluminum, sir?
Aluminum, too.
10%?
25%.
25 for aluminum as well?
25 for both.
There you heard it from President Trump. This was moments ago. During his first visit now in 2018, Trump imposed a 25% tariff on Canadian steel products and 10% on aluminum products, citing national security concerns. And at that time, Canada responded with countermeasures against billions of dollars of American steel, aluminum, and other products. Eventually, an exemption was granted to Canada. Trump also again said he wants Canada to become the 51st state.
I love the people of Canada. We have a great relationship. But if they became our 51st state, it would be the greatest thing they could ever do. It would be unbelievable. It would be a cherished state. And think of how beautiful that country would be without that artificial line running right through it. Somebody drew it many years.
And reactions are coming in on this development. Ontario Conservative leader Doug Ford has responded to Trump's comments. In a post on X, Ford said in part, "This is the next 4 years, shifting goalposts and constant chaos, putting our economy at risk." Let's break it all down. We have with us Evan Solomon. Evan is a CTV News political contributor and G0 media publisher. Evan, great to have you once again on the program. Here we are discussing tariffs in less than a week.
Well, this is another remarkable development, but it's not shocking, actually. This is an unreliable partner. And it's not just that partners can no longer take Donald Trump at his word. They can no longer take America at its word. America is now retreating from its treaties, its word, its alliances. And now we see that it's retreating from the very promise that Donald Trump made. Remember, 4 years ago, 4.5 years ago, in 2020, Donald Trump signed the new NAFTA agreement. He negotiated it. He said it was a beautiful treaty. He said it was so much better. Here we are in 2025. He's already saying he's going to rip it up. Now he's said, I'll put tariffs on Canada, but I'll give a 30-day reprieve. Now he's on his way to the Super Bowl. And he says, actually, I'm going to slap 25% tariffs on steel and aluminum on everyone, including Canada and Mexico. And look, remember, you mentioned it earlier. Under national security concerns in his first term, he put 25% tariffs on steel and 10% on aluminum. That's called a 232 tariff. That's national security concern. As if Canadian steel was a national security concern to the United States. It wasn't. That's why we got the exception. But apparently, the 30-day reprieve is up. Now he's hitting us again with tariffs. Now, let's see what happens tomorrow. But clearly, if you're negotiating with Donald Trump and he says something today, he may say something totally different tomorrow. He is a chaotic and unreliable partner right now. And I will say one last thing. If these steel and aluminum tariffs go through, he said there's also going to be reciprocal tariffs potentially Tuesday and Wednesday. Now, does that mean he's going to hit Canada, who has some protections around, for example, the dairy industry? Will he hit Canada with that? In other words, was this 30-day reprieve just a fiction? And now Donald Trump has gone back on it. Very early days. Prime Minister has not commented yet, but it does show you that Canada has to be ready for dollar reciprocal tariffs at any time, because Donald Trump is not a reliable negotiating partner.
And speaking of the Prime Minister, Evan, we know the Prime Minister is in Europe doing precisely that, trying to find better partners that Canada can trust, Canada can do business with, can rely on, because clearly relationship has changed with the South because of this presidency. But if we can just go back to the issue at hand also about what we are facing here in terms of data, Evan, we understand Canada exports iron and steel to the U.S. at about a tune of $8.5 billion U.S. Aluminum to the U.S. is about $11.3 billion U.S. How, in your view, 25% tariffs on Canada, on the steel and aluminum industry, how devastating that's going to be? We know we've been there before. It lasted for about a year and they had to be reversed. But in this economic climate, how bad it's going to be?
Well, first of all, there's two ways to look at it. they're going to be very difficult for the steel and aluminum industries, and there'll be reciprocal trade. So things will get more expensive in Canada and the U.S. Those two industries alone will not be enough to hurt the Canadian economy overall. That's different than the 25% overall tariff.
Yeah.
And you've talked about the size of those businesses. They're not material enough to have a devastating consequences on the overall economy. But by the way, let's not diminish how hurt those major industries will be in certain parts of our country. But it also shows, and the markets will react to this, that Donald Trump is very serious about tariffs and is very serious about hitting Canada and Mexico, his closest trading allies, with tariffs. And if he's doing it on steel and aluminum, and if he's doing it at 25%, what's next? How high will the reciprocal tariffs be? And what else will he do? So, it's not just that it's, quote, devastating to these industries.
Yeah.
It's that he clearly is freelancing. And what will he do? This is kind of like what, during the Cold War, when people tried to understand the Soviet Union, you'd have something called the Kremlinology. Like, how do we read what's happening inside the Kremlin? This is like Trumpology. How do you understand it? So that's the first thing. Just one thing that you said, Akshay, earlier, as you were kind of going through what Justin Trudeau's trying to do, which is diversify trade. Yeah. There is a real need, obviously, to diversify and increase trade with Europe, and certainly to knock down interprovincial trade barriers. That is absolutely essential. But let's make no mistake about it. As consequential, as important, and as urgent as those are, they will not replace the United States as Canada's main market ever, and certainly they won't make a dent for a long time.
Indeed.
So this is still a clear and present and ever-changing danger. Yeah. And here's Donald Trump going to the Super Bowl, Akshay, and doing what he likes to do best, which is he doesn't like anybody else to make news. That's so if you think you're going to think about the Super Bowl, instead, you and I are not drinking beer and eating chips and waiting to talk
betting
about
on the game or something like that.
Yeah,
but
betting on the game. It's going to be the Eagles or the Chiefs, which, by the way, I'd love to talk to you about because I'm a heavy football fan. Instead, we're talking about what? Donald Trump. Right. And that's what he's done. He's taken the headlines, and that's what he likes to do.
I have to ask you about this question because that comment, again, cannot be ignored. He once again reiterated, Evan, on Canada being the 51st state. And referring to the border, he says the artificial line. And then he goes on to say that there are subsidies. And this is important. There is something called as a trade deficit. There is something called as a subsidy, and they both are different. He once again spoke of the subsidies, saying that there are subsidies to the tune of $200 billion between Canada and the U.S. So you wonder how serious really is in the same week when the Prime Minister spoke to business leaders in Canada and said that the President is really serious about absorbing Canada as the 51st state.
Actually, you and I have had this conversation a lot. There's always been this argument. Do you take Donald Trump seriously or literally or both? He's the President of the United States of America. He makes laws. He has executive order power. When he repeatedly claims he wants to make Canada the 51st state, it's no longer a joke. It's no longer just a taunt. It's no longer just an insult. It's no longer just a way to negotiate. It's clearly become not just a trial balloon, but part of what he really genuinely wants. He's expressed a desire to take over the Panama Canal, Greenland, Canada, and the Gaza Strip. I don't know if any of these are going to actually happen, but let's just play it out. If you want to take over Canada by economic force, what is the first thing you do? You try to undermine its economic prosperity. And he is doing everything in his power to have, and how do you do that? You lower the dollar, you decide to destroy industries, steel and aluminum, you put high tariffs on that you would hurt the GDP of Canada and drive it into recession. So you hurt the economy and try to make, quote, winning conditions for some kind using economic force. He's doing it. Yeah. We should take it seriously. Right today, if you're in the steel and aluminum industry, you're going to wake up on Monday morning and your entire future is in jeopardy. Indeed. And he's unless people think it's all talk, look what's going on internally. I live in the United States now.
Right.
He is renovating well, it's more than a renovation. It's a transformation of the government. USAID, which is the aid agency that uses $40 billion, started by John F. Kennedy, to essentially 75% of the stuff they do is feed hungry people. Places like Sudan, 10,000 people reduced to 300 people in days.
Right.
So here's a guy who's unafraid to make these changes. So he's coming after Canada, and Canadian politicians are taking it seriously. People feel betrayed.
Yeah.
And here's yet another moment where he's trying to weaken our economy
Indeed.
to create those conditions, which, by the way, if you listen to any Canadian, will never happen.